What to do with your 401k isn't as simple as most people think. So I'm going to go over the options that you have and then provide some considerations to aid you in deciding on what is best for your own situation. In all reality, you really have one of three options. The first, you can keep the money in that 401k, assuming your employer lets you. You can perform a tax free rollover into an IRA, either Roth or traditional, or you could cash it out. So, how do you decide? Well, stick with me. We'll go over the different considerations necessary to identify which option may be best for you. Real quick, I'm John, owner of Alpha Mega Wealth Management and a personal finance teacher at a Big Ten university. If you find this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to my channel. The first consideration, cost. So you might be actually like the 41% of Americans that the Government Accountability Office found did not know their 401k has any fees. But yeah, as you probably know, there is no such thing as a free lunch, and your 401k is no exception. The fees are also typically more than just a simple percentage. You'll want to ask, what's my total cost for the 401k? And the different expenses can come in numerous forms. Here are some common ones. You might have an asset management fee. You might have individual investment fees. You might have record keeping fees. You might have different administrative fees. And you don't really know for sure if you, the employee, are paying for those or if the employer is paying for those. And there could be other expenses. You don't really know. The way to actually learn is that you'll have to ask your plan administrator, and sometimes they're even hard to get a hold of. So if you go to your HR rep, they'll put you in the right direction to be able to identify what your total all in cost is for your 401k. I've been personally seeing plan fees come down in recent years. They're not zero, but after accounting for everything, it's usually in the like 1 to 2% range. But again, every plan is just so different. So you'll really have to check in to identify what your plan costs are. So once you identify your plan costs, you'll then have to compare that to the alternative. For example, let's say rolling it into an IRA. At this point, I would say that most IRAs with, let's say, Fidelity, Schwab, some of the big custodians, they don't have ongoing fees outside of the internal investment fees. And this is, again, assuming that you're the one that's responsible for all the investment management and you're not hiring someone else out. So you could, for example, buy a mutual fund at Schwab, and the only fee you might be paying is the, let's say, hypothetically, say a 0.05% fee for the mutual fund that you bought. This could be much cheaper than what you're getting with your 401k, but you still have to make the decision as to what you're investing in with an IRA. And this is also in a universe of seemingly endless investment options. In contrast, your 401k plan, what they typically have are only a few vetted options for you to pick from. In my experience, it's usually somewhere between 10 to 20 options, sometimes a few more, sometimes a few less. In my experience, the 401k provider is not going to do any sort of tax planning. They can help you with some rebalancing. It's usually clunky. The investment allocation, they're really only going to speak to you about that account, not your other accounts. That's why when people pay me, that's what I help them with. So, in conclusion, does your 401k have stellar investment options with low fees? Perhaps consider leaving it there. Are the fees really high compared to an IRA? Consider doing a tax free rollover. The second consideration is control and ease of access. An older advisor I used to work with said that 401ks are like the jaws of an alligator. Great for getting money into, very tough to get money out of. So every 401k is different, but most that I encounter make it such a pain to withdraw any money. Sometimes if there is an online software they're using, which most of them have, they're usually clunky and confusing. Even sometimes for me as an advisor who sees these all the time, I come across some and I think, how in the world would the average person be able to navigate this whole software with all these crazy different terms that they're using without any definitions? Sometimes they even require you to submit paperwork just to do a simple withdrawal. As you can imagine, this is just another barrier in place to doing what you maybe ought to do with your different accounts, whether that's rebalancing, evaluating investment options, withdrawing the funds when they're needed. IRAs, in contrast, are typically not as difficult to perform any of these different aforementioned functions. Having this control and ease of access is really tough to quantify, but when you need it the most, you typically wish you had it. The third consideration, investment options. As I mentioned before, most 401ks have a pre-selected small number of investment options for you to pick from. In my experience, these options have become better over the last few years, but they aren't always great. And more often, there are some good ones intermixed with bad ones, and it's really tough to identify which one's which unless you're a trained professional. I recall a 401k plan for a client where the cheapest S&P 500 or equivalent index fund had an expense ratio of over 0.5%. And as you may know, you could go and buy a Vanguard S&P 500 ETF in your IRA for an internal expense ratio of only 0.03%. This fee is surprisingly substantial over time. If you had a $1 million account and a 30-year retirement, the difference of using the low-cost option versus the high-cost option would be $1 million more in inflation-adjusted dollars. But even aside from the cost, your options are limited. In an IRA, you have essentially the entire universe of securities to pick from: stocks, bonds, ETFs, mutual funds, whatever fits your situation best. Now, for some, actually having unlimited options would probably give you analysis paralysis, and you'd rather have them pre-selected for you, or at least boiled down into just a few securities for you to pick from. That's not a bad idea, but I found that having the flexibility to choose what fits your situation best is better than something that fits all right. In most 401k plans that I review, I'm able to find investment options that I think are well suited for my clients from a long term perspective, low cost, broad market indexes. It's not always the case that I can't find those, but I often do. The fourth consideration: organization. So it's a common story to have accumulated numerous 401ks and other IRAs over the years from various jobs and switching of jobs. I mean, I have seen 4, 6, 8 different 401ks, different IRAs that are out there, because every time you switched a job, it either stayed with the employer or you moved it out to an IRA, but that went to someone else. And so it's out in the ether and you don't really know what's going on. Most of my current clients find it such a relief to have everything consolidated into a few different accounts all under the same roof. I found this actually provides, I would say, like better decision making, because you actually know what's going on. When there's uncertainty about your financial situation, because you have so many accounts out there, it's hard to think about challenging or important financial decisions. And the easiest thing to do is just to put off whatever issue might be in front of you. There are other challenges too as you approach retirement. Which of the 10 accounts are you going to pull money from? How should you invest all these different accounts given the options available to you? Don't get me started on figuring out different RMD rules associated with these different accounts. One unique thing that many 401ks allow for is for you to roll over your other 401k accounts into your current employer's 401k. You want to make sure that the fees aren't excessive, but this could be a good option if your primary goal is consolidation for the sake of organization. The fifth consideration: coordination. So this is in a similar vein to organization. There is coordination. By having everything moved into just a few accounts in the same roof, you can far more easily coordinate your investment allocation, your investment location, which is a bigger deal than most people think, your withdrawal strategies, charitable giving strategies, RMD strategies. All of those things are so much easier when they can coordinate easily together. Another thing about coordination: think about beneficiary designations. It's hard to keep those straight with so many accounts out there. One of my clients had an old outstanding account that was a substantial amount of money. The beneficiary on that account: his ex-wife, and she probably would have taken it. So be aware. Those are the primary considerations, but there are some miscellaneous considerations that you ought to be aware of. The first is that one 401k, if you do transfer to an IRA, will often be split into two different IRAs, Roth and traditional. If your one 401k can have both Roth and traditional components to it, maybe you put in Roth and your employer matched you, that employer matching would be traditional money. So within the same 401k, you will have two types of tax treatments for the money. So when you open your IRA to transfer the 401k into, you'll have to open up both a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. It's a little confusing, but just be aware of it. Another consideration is something called net unrealized appreciation. This happens when you have company stock that's in your 401k. So this is a unique planning strategy that allows for potentially favorable tax treatment if you have company stock in your 401k. With your company stock, you're allowed to move that stock out of your 401k and not to an IRA, but a taxable brokerage account. In my personal finance class, I call this a non-retirement flex account because there are no rules on contribution amounts. Once the company stock is here, you'll have to pay ordinary income taxes on the company stock. Sounds bad, right? But here's the catch. You only pay ordinary income tax on the cost basis of the stock, or what the value was when you received the stock. The growth is taxed at the more favorable capital gains tax rate. And depending on your situation, this may result in fewer taxes than if you just moved everything, including that company stock, to a traditional IRA from your 401k and began withdrawing money from there. There are plenty of more planning considerations when it involves NUA, but if this applies to you, at least know you have the opportunity to play the tax game wisely and reduce your bill to Uncle Sam. The last miscellaneous consideration are penalty-free withdrawals. So typically, if you withdraw money from a retirement account before age 59 and a half, you are hit with an additional 10% penalty tax on top of any other taxes that you owe. However, there is a unique rule with 401ks. If you leave your job when you turn 55 or older and you leave your money in that specific company's 401k plan, you can take withdrawals and avoid that 10% extra penalty tax. You don't avoid the other taxes you might owe, but that extra penalty, you do avoid that. Interestingly, you could even get a different job later before 59 and a half and still withdraw money from that first company's 401k if it's the one that you left after turning 55. The kicker is that it still needs to be left in that company's 401k and you cannot move it to an IRA. If your situation calls for needing money to be withdrawn from your 401k and you don't qualify for other hardship exclusions, then this may be a reason to not roll your money into an IRA. Thanks for sticking around. If you would like to see if you're a fit for working with our firm, there's a link in the description below. If you found this video even mildly helpful, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. Stay curious out there.